Welcome to the Gestal Swine Summit. My name's Matthew Rhoda, and I will be your host for today's conference. My typical role in the industry is serving as the president and CEO of Swine Tech. And for my entire life, I've been dedicated to improving pig cares in the swine industry. Today's conference is about mixing parities. And our speaker is Dr. Isaac Huerta. The program for today is in two sections. First, Dr. Huerta's conference, and second, a discussion panel. We invite you to ask questions in the Q&A, and those questions will be answered by the speaker or the panel. Let's go to the conference. Dr. Isaac Huerta is originally from Catalonia, and he got his DVM degree from the University of Zaragoza. In 2008, he finished his master's in swine management and health, and he started his career working for Nutricrow's Research Center in Holland, and then moved to Mexico to lead a field trial. In 2010, he joined Magapor's team as head of technical services North America, where he helped to implement post-cervical artificial insemination in several farms across the USA and Canada. He also ran several trials in GTCs and published those trials in peer-reviewed magazine and international conferences. In 2013, he moved back to Spain and joined Elanco as the technical leader for the northeast of Spain, where he ran antibiotic efficacy trials and evaluated lung lesions and abattoirs. In 2015, Isaac joined PIC as the technical services director for Southern Europe and was promoted to technical services European director in June of 2020. Dr. Huerta, the stage is yours.
Hey, Matthew. Thanks for the nice introduction. Actually, it makes me feel a little bit older now. But it's good to remember all these years around and abroad, where I learned and I enjoyed, and the most important thing, I did very good friends too. So, hi everybody. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today. And let me tell you something. I'm very excited to be able to speak about this particular topic. I think that during around the last 5-6 years, we learned a lot about it. And as a good friend of mine was saying, let me tell you something. I will do my best to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I hope you can take home a bit of our experience in Europe with pen gestation management and the link it has with electronic sow feeding systems in order to generate some nice ideas or concerns about what we do and how we do it. And if it's possible, just if it's possible at the end, to have a wider vision about the different types of ESF and how to integrate gilts into pen gestation from our point of view. So let me share my screen and let's start with the conference. So today we will start from the end. Yes, this is a spoiler slide. I hope that during my presentation, those 6 important points will be touched and also covered. Although the main intention of the whole presentation is to talk a bit about how the animal welfare regulations during the last years changed the situation in Europe. That's going to be only one slide. As well as that, we will go deeper into the topic. But before we talk a bit about the strong and the weak points of ESF, I will do a review on the main causes that lead the farrowing rate to be lower than what we expect. Even if today maybe it's not a limitation, it's an advantage, because we know that training in some of the machines, it's very easy. I will go through our experience on training gilts and the results that we got about it. I think it's an important topic in the industry, and we will finish with a few field experiences that we had in our whole team in Europe during the last 5 years. So I think I can add some value to you on those conversations that we will have today. Sometimes they say that it's better an image than 100 words. So here we see how the industry was like before than 2012. And on the right side of the screen, we see how some people is seeing the industry nowadays. But it's always good to remind that we lost some farmers that once on the way, and also we had some others that had some difficulties to adapt to this new situation. Also, it's not a topic for today, but you will all know that we are facing some other potential changes in Europe that will have some, for sure, impact in a few years. One of them will be the free farrowing or the shared lactation in groups. But that's another topic, and let's leave that for another day. At that time that I'm showing on the picture, ESF system became the only way to keep the farm size and avoid losing up to 30% of the sow inventory. We also had farmers that were able to cut the crates by half, and then on that way they adapt to the regulation. This strategy was cheaper, as we know, but it needed to remove some crates. So that means that they lost some sow inventory. So on this slide and the next one, we will be talking a little bit about the two different groups of ESF, the tunnel kind and the free access kind. On this particular one, what we see on the screen, the animals enter from one side and they come out from the other one. In all of them, training is crucial and it's the key of success. But I don't know any of this kind that I'm showing right now, the tunnel kind, that training is not a major action item and that have good performance without doing a good training. Normally, training takes around 2 weeks, more or less, I would say, in most of them, and is done in gilts. And normally, we try to do that in the GDU, the gilt development units, prior to breeding. This system has been normally used only in big farms and new farms because the pen design and the layout that we will do normally needs to be decided from the scratch to make a good facility. But for example, in this one that is called free access ESF type, the gilt or the sow enters and exits from the same side. But animals are able to eat peacefully without animals disturbing them. Although one of the key advantages is training, as I told you, you have the majority of the gilts that learn by themselves. So we will speak a little bit about that later on. But you don't need to spend that 2 weeks full of them training because you require much less time to train the gilts. On the picture, you can see a couple of different systems with the same strategy, that it's what we call the free access type. Normally, the ones that has the open sides, that it looks like a window, they have a little bit better success on the entry ratio, meaning that even with this kind, we also see differences on the way that we have to train the animals. I'm not sure if we have many more people on the call today that can give you numbers about it, but what I can tell you, it's what we see on the field. Coming back to the free access kind, we see this in new big farms with the design specifically for them as the one that I said before, but we also saw that becoming very popular on the adaptation of all farms to the animal welfare regulation in 2012. So that means that these kind of systems, we normally have more experience because they have been for longer time in Europe. So, of course, as all of you were expecting on this slide, or that something that I will talk during my presentation, it's covered the strongest points of ESF in all the systems. And also the advantage and limitations that will make you think about during this presentation and after this presentation, which one will fit better on your particular situation. So on point number one, as mentioned it before, those systems, all of them, were the easy solution to adapt into the new regulation without losing inventory. You need to think about that on that particular year, 2012, that was the last one, that was a main cause of problems, reducing the sow inventory. On the bullet point number two, we saw a big window for all the technical services teams around the world to learn more about behavior patterns and set up individualized feeding curve, depending on the body condition, for example, the parity, or even specific needs that you have on a particular pen. This is something impossible on the free access or half crate systems, not the ESF. Okay, remember ESF, it can be tunnel system or free access ESF systems. Related to the previous one, on the next one, the number 3, we have been able to see and to learn from feed intake patterns from a specific animal and take quick actions. That was something that was totally impossible before. On the number 4 is how easy it is to identify an animal, that maybe here it's one of the concerns, that did not eat part of the feed that we are trying to give to the animal, or even that they didn't even enter to the stage or to the system. But also I can tell you something here. This is giving us an opportunity to go inside the pen, look after them, find out, if possible, the reason that it's causing the problem and solve it. So on the number 5, the next one, we have the opportunity to change the feed diet. So we might be able to mix the feed, to switch the amount of feed that we use, slowly up, slowly down, depending on the moment, without having a huge impact on the animal. Remember one thing, I mean, as a veterinarians or technical people, we normally have a specific feeding strategies, but we change it by 1 day. So doing that, less stress, I think that it's always meaning good results. As I write here in number 6, in some models, you might even play further. You have some electronics possibilities that it's having you the machine and setting up administration of hormones or feed supplements. And the last one, maybe less important in some commercials, but I would say that it's crucial in genetic farms, is the weight of the animal every day, every single day, and the feeding intake pattern, especially on the GDUs, to know the weight of the gill prior to breeding, and also the average daily feed, the average daily gains that we have on the farm and on the system. So, of course, after talking a little bit about the beauty, I think that we cannot skip this slide on the major limitations that we have on those ESF systems. The first text box that you have on the left, we have electronics as a word, right? So remember, I mean, not remember, our reality, we are in rural areas and not always it's easy to have good and reliable source of electricity. Depending on the machine, and for sure this is not my job here today, you might need different sizes of generators to be able to run the systems. Let's remember, sorry, if a problem occurs, you need a solution. But as well as that, and for me here, it's my part, it's the key of success, I will always say that it's not the machine itself, it's the personnel that have in the farm that nowadays will make the difference. Farmer, remember, it's not only a person that have the largest, for sure, animal experience and the care of the animal and the management of the animal. The farmer also needs to have higher skills in technology and electronics. Nowadays, we cannot forget about this one place. The second one from the left might be key depending on the system used. Of course, it's crucial in tunnel kind systems and a little bit less important on the free access ESF systems. But let's not forget that training will be another mandatory job in the farm that somebody will have to do, and it will have to be done properly. As I say, well executed. The middle one, sometimes I like to make examples or comparisons. It's like a car. I mean, those machines need maintenance. And I'm not talking about the mechanics itself and only the mechanics. I'm going to say the after sales technical services provider is giving to you. Also, I'm talking about the daily maintenance, the one that we have to do. We need to keep it clean, the machines. We need to make sure that we understand the machine. And also, we need to follow the rules of the provider. Every machine has different rules, but for sure, having a perfect maintenance will be key to have success with those ESF systems. And then on the fourth one, I put the word, I don't know if it's correct or not, educated staff. But to me, it doesn't mean the training or skills on working with technology. It's not forgetting that you are working with a machine. So even if it looks funny, we think like, hey, the machine will do all my job. But no, the machine don't have brain. And they will do what they are supposed to do. Not less, not more. So keeping an eye on the animals, it's our job, not theirs. So let's not forget that this going into the pens or going around the barn, it will be a man job and not a machine job. So you will see on the experiences that I'm going to tell you today, one example that fits perfectly on that situation that I'm telling right now. But let's leave that for the end of my presentation. Also, the system uses a lot of information. And let's try to be more efficient, not less. The system is providing information, check the status of the animals, check the pens, follow up on treatments. So let's use the system from what it's made to do. And the last one, but not least, for sure, it's cost. Now you see, I switch a little bit the word cost and I put it bigger here with a question mark. Why do I do that? Because normally we think that those systems are more expensive. And if you check the system itself, yes, that's a true story. But if you compare it only with the past systems that was having all the animals in normal crates, or nowadays with the pen gestation that you cut by half. But today, implications on animal welfare, the conditions switch a little bit the movie. So I think it becomes cheaper than free access cage per animal, because the free access cage per animal, it's one crate that it's free access per all the animals that you have in the pen. And nowadays, with the prices of the iron that are close to the sky and all the limitations in terms of square meters that don't count the same in ESF than crates, I think that I will have to think a little bit further about if cost is more efficient or not. So this slide, what I'm trying to do with this slide, sorry. Up to this point, we already seen the limitations and the advantage of the system, but let's put a question here. Why we have some animals that lose gestation after a positive preg check? And now you will think, hey, Isaac, this is a normal thing that happened in all the farms. And I would say yes. But today, even if it's not a tech or let's say a repro conference call or webinar, I'm going to walk you through them only a little bit to make sure that we understand that all the ones here will have an impact on my losses, but the top 3, the ones that you see in dark blue, are the ones related to ESF. The other ones, any farm, any of your daily works, you will see them happening in all of them. So you will think that all of them are important. So let's talk about the first 3. Lack of training. I think it's been clear since the beginning that the machine requires lots of training. And this will be key or failure, and it will decide if you will have strong performance or not in your farm. It will drive the animals to erratic feed intake patterns if the training is not done properly, and the consequence of it, for sure, we all know it, right? It's negative. Calibration, either feed or water, depending on the machine, can feed and water at the same place, or some others only feed and the water is outside. We know that also from previous comments, this will lead us to better understand the maintenance, and having good quality and access to the technical services after selling one of those machines will be key. But I'm going to say one thing here that maybe not everybody will like it. Remember, biosecurity, it's very important. So the one related to the machines is an incorrect ratio of animals per machine. And don't make me wrong on that, okay? But I think it can be a double-edged sword, even for us and for the provider, because that does not mean that we don't have to believe the provider recommendations, but for sure means one thing. We need to be really, really critical on it, because not all the farms are perfect. Not all the farms has the best environment. For sure, not all the farms has the best health. The pen design or the adaptation of your previous pen to the ESF will be different. The water quality and quality, for sure, is obvious that will be different depending on the farm. So what I mean by that is machine can fit a lot of animals, for sure. That's right. But sometimes the ratios won't fit in my reality. So from here, we will show you one experience as well, that this had an important implication on the success or the solution of the problem that we had in one customer. And now let me walk very fast on the other ones. The lack of attention is bad in all the farms. Daily check of the animals, I mean, for sure will prevent future problems. We can have outfit animals, lame. We might have different sick animals on the pen. So lack of attention, it's going to be a problem, and not having this will prevent future problems, as I said before. Then the quality of the animals, and for sure the quantity of the animals that you enter to your system. Also the body condition of those animals that you have in the pen. It might change many things. As well, it will affect the dominance inside the pen. You know that when we mix a pen, we will find some hierarchy there, some dominance animals and some animals that will be less dominant. So we call the animals that are not able to be in front of the dominant ones, and they will be afraid to go to eat. And also that will make that we need to make sure that we control the pens during the first days after mixing. It will happen in both systems for sure, but it's more important in ESF. And also the pen design, as I was telling you before, it will play a role. It will affect the machine because not all the pens are valid for all the machines. So being said that, I think that I covered almost all of them, and I went a little bit deeper on the top 3 that I think that are the more important ones today. So, of course, I cannot leave the strengths, the limitations, and all the comments without saying, how do you have to train the gilts? So you might imagine that even if we have less training on the free access ones, in general, ESF, electronic self-feeding systems as a whole, they will have training required. So training will be key, and you have moments where it becomes easier. So, for example, let's think about the tunnel type, that is where the mandatory training, it's a very, very important job in the farm. You need people, you need patience, and you need the skills. And if it's not done properly, it will impact your performance. I can tell you that for sure. There are many tricks here. I mean, some people put a light on the tunnel, some people use dummy machines, some people plays a role with the density of the animals on the pen, or also animals that are trained with animals that are untrained. So it's going to be many, many other tricks that we can talk about if you wish so. But we normally perform eat around, I would say between, as you see on the screen, between 80 and 100 kilos of live weight. Before than that, we think it can have two negative impacts. One, the development of the animal, because you know that some of the recommendations of the genetic companies will be the development of the animal. So doing that before 80 kilos, it will have some impact on the development of the animal. And the other one, it's, I think that if you do much before than 80 kilos, most of the machines will not be designed to feed the animals and the small animals inside. So you will have some little troubles about how to do that and how to move the animals and train the animals. So if you do it after, as you can see here on the screen, I mean, for the worker, heavier animals will be more difficult to handle. And then maybe you will have compromised the weighted breeding that we highly recommend on the genetic companies. So this slide, it's important that you pay really good attention to it, because it's only a visual example on a gilt that entered into a pen, but the training on the GDU was not done correctly. So as we see here on the ranking of the animals, that it's going to be on the red box that now appears to the screen, we have the ranking of the animal. We can see that she has been always more or less on the last third of gilts that enter to the pen. You can see on green ranking number 47. And now if you see the bars, the blue bars, you might see that one day she's entering and the other one is not entering. So what I call it's one day of feed, one day probably somebody in the company, in the farm, will need to help this animal to enter to the machine to have the daily feed. So in the other hand, the bottom graph that you see, it shows the volume of feed that she was eating. So in that particular example, if we don't take immediate actions on this pen, come on, guess what? She will lose pregnancy for sure.
So Dr. Huerta, this might be a great time to ask a couple questions. The question I'd like to ask to start would be, when we do identify gilts or sows that are not eating and they need immediate intervention, what does immediate intervention look like?
Hey, Matthew, thanks. Okay, if I understood correctly your question, it's when do we need to check at that? I would say that most of the ESF systems, they have an alarm system that is telling you at the end of the day, when the machine closes, it's telling you the animals that didn't go to eat. So I'm not going to talk now in a perfect world that my answer would be really polite and really theoretical to say like, hey, at the end of the day, you need to check all the animals, gilts or sows that didn't enter and help them to enter and get the feed, because they need to eat every day. But I would say that one of the most common actions that we do in farms is we check the animals that don't eat the day before. So when we finish the day, the next day we allow the whole day the animal to try to enter by himself. If she's not entering as well that day, we will normally go and help this animal to go in. And now the second part of the question, I would say that in terms of how that differs or how much care we have to take, I think that all the systems, this would be not an answer only for ESF. All the system requires that you go to pay attention to animals. I would tell you that this particular case, it's telling you on the computer which animals didn't enter. On the other kind, you need to go by yourself to the pen to check the animals that are not eating. I would say that almost all of them. Oh, go ahead.
Now, do you typically then see an improvement in the amount of labor that it takes to identify sows that are not eating well and providing that intervention?
That's also a common thing that happens. I mean, on the new farms, the answer is yes. It has some more labor because the people needs to get used to the system. They need to get used to know where to find the animals. But let me tell you something. Normally, those systems is not like, hey, I have, in this particular case, 75 animals in a pen. That doesn't mean that you need to go to the whole pen to look for all the animals. You will need to find one or two on that pen. And normally, when you have experience, it's really easy to go to the corner, the specific place where they are waiting or laying down. So it takes a little bit more labor. The answer is yes. But I would say when you get trained, you know where to go to pick them up. And then it becomes like at that time that you pick the animal that is not entering, you take that time to check the other animals, to check the health, if they are sick, if they are lame or something, other things. So I would say that at the end, when you are experienced, the time would be pretty much similar. So I'm going to keep on on the presentation. So it's very important. I'm going to show now you two slides that for me are very, very important. On this slide and the following one, what I want you to have is a very quickly view on what was the impact of training and why I'm so hard pushing on this particular thing to do perfectly on all the farms that I have. ESF, of course, now maybe another question will come that's even more important on the tunnel type. So during the 15 days, as you can see on the bottom, you say that 15 days of restriction during the first 7 days. So what that means is during 15 days, I'm training the animals. During the first 7 days, we have some restrictions on the feed intake because that generates that they are hungry to enter the following day, and it helps us to train better the animals. But what I'm trying to do is during these 15 days of training, we separated the animals that ate less than 1 kilo, for example, on the corner on the left side, and the ones that ate more than 2 kilos. And then we make 4 categories to make sure that we study the whole different groups. Let's make a very, very easy key message from here. It's the ones that eat, as you can see on the two left groups and on the two right groups, that are eating more than 1.5 kilos as an average during the training period. They have been candidates to be bred on more than 95% of the gilts that presented standing heat. But to the other extreme, only 30% of the gilts were being able to have problems, or were having problems, sorry, and they had some learning difficulties. So those ones did not show heat properly, and we needed either to treat them with hormones or antibiotics or analgesics, or we needed to remove them from the farm. So that means it's a cost. If you don't train properly, that will have an impact. And now the main comment that comes up after this slide, it's saying that it's going to be the answer on the next one. This has the only implication is that I'm going to lose some animals. No, the answer is not. We can very easily see on this slide that the animals after training, how long it took to them to show the first recorded heat. Not the breeding one, be careful, the first recorded heat. So in more than 60% of the animals that eat 1.5 kilos at least per day during the training, they show the standing heat before 20 days. As you can see here with the two blue and dark blue bars showing that the summatory is 60%. So on the right side, now let's go to the graph on the right, we can see that prolificacy and performance. So not only that they needed more time to show the heat or some external interventions, that also the ones that were not eating properly during the training, we had some impact on total born and born alive, as you might see on the right graph. And of course, you see that 1.5 kilos per day or more were giving us the best results on that one. So now let's see what are the main strategies from our experience. That's our experience, remember, in order to have a successful gestation in gilts. First of all, the most important thing is to remind that any good start is going to be a key factor. So we all know that. Starting good, it's going to be mandatory to have good performance. So the first week after mixing the animals in the pens, it's very important to pay close attention. And now most of you would say, hey, I have pens already, and this is very important for me when I have pens and it's not ESF. For sure, it's exactly as important as having ESF. But I'm going to say here one thing. ESF, it's a problem if you have a pen and the animal is not going to eat. In normal pens, normally you will have one feeder per animal. They might have some fights as well, but they will be able to eat at the end of the day. A little bit less quantity maybe, but in the case of ESF, if they don't enter, they will not eat. So you will play the dominance a little bit higher rates. But although on the first 7-10 days in a pen, normally you would establish the dominance. So as said also in the previous slide, I'm repeating many times correct training because I think that it's one of the critical things to have good performance. On the free access type, for sure, it's maybe less necessary. And I would say in my experience, I don't know if it's the same with the people that is organizing the conference, but between 3, maybe to 5% of the animals, you might need to help them to enter to the ESF station. In the other systems, the percentage of animals that you need to help them to enter normally is a little bit higher. And remember, the other ones had 15 days of previous training, and those systems they don't play the training period at all. So the other one, the third one, If the design of your farm allows, I would say that segregation by parity, normally it's a very good idea. I would say that this is what most of the farms use, but it's not the only one. We have, and we'll see some examples, many places that they have to mix the animals, and it's not a big deal, so you can do it. But on the last one, you see that I write static groups and especially small groups, less than 40 animals. What I mean by that, it's always when you have pens that are smaller than 40 to set up a number, I normally try to say that the static is better. It doesn't mean that if it's not possible, we can do it, so we can mix, but we need to improve much more the management, the body condition. We need to decide on how we mix the animals, for example, parities 1s and 2s, and then the older parities go to another side. So we need to pay attention to different things. But in my opinion, as I said, if it's a small group and you can keep it static, normally it's better. In any case, if dynamic groups, it's the thing that we have to use. Normally, I like to enter and remove from the dynamic group similar number of animals. So you prepare a bunch of animals and you remove this number of animals from the pen and you include on this pen the same number of animals. Normally like that, you will have a little bit better success. So I don't know if it's a nice place to say it, but I think it fits perfectly. Not always the same strategy will have the same success rate in all the farms. So that's important because we might have to adapt to different strategies depending on the situation. So as I promised at the beginning of my conference, I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience in Europe. During the last 5-6 years, we gathered a lot of information in pen gestation with ESF machines. And I think that we learned a lot. As I was saying at the beginning to Matthew, I think that on the last 6 years, I learned a lot, and my team also learned a lot about ESF. So I think that those experiences, you will see them that fits maybe in your reality, and if it's not your reality, they might fit in your future reality for sure. But I'm sure that you will face some of those experiences as well. So let's pay attention to this one, the experience one. And as I told you, I will show you 5 experiences. In this farm, I'm going to make a little bit always the same pattern, situation of the farm. I'm going to say what was the problematic of that farm that made us to take different actions. Then the actions that we took into place, either if they work or didn't work, I'm going to show you everything, and the outcome of the solution. For sure, now the outcome is to try to recover all the values that we had before the problem. So on this particular experience, it was a farm that it's stable to birds, so it's positive, but it's stable. They work with dynamic pens of 40, 42, 43 gilts per pen. So I say here 40 plus gilts per pen. The square pen, so the density on the pen with the 2 machines, normally it's located in the central area. The machines, as you see on the blue, I tried to simulate the blue machines here. And the density of the pen, it's correct, and it's following the regulations. The ratio, more or less, it's 20 gilts per machine. And what we saw here, or why the farmer was calling us, it was he had an excess percentage of losses in gestation. Because remember, the main consequence of all my presentation today, even if we are not talking about reproductive, it's that we will lose animals that will not arrive to farrowing room. So what we call, it's the percentage of animals that you lose from break check to the farrowing area or the farrowing room. So when he called us, we went there because he was not having good success on the farrowing rate. And we entered, and the first thing that we saw it was like some heterogeneity on the animals. So we thought like, hey, maybe he's not using the pen properly. He's not entering the animals on the correct body condition. So we played the basics, right? Hey, how is he having the echography? How is he doing the breathing, the heat check, all the basics. But when we realized that the problem was not coming really down, we start to think, hey, is it possible to add a 3rd machine into the pen? And now maybe the people here on the call will not like the design, but we felt like the best way for this particular farm was to add the ESF free access machine close to the wall, because it was easier for us to train the little bit animals that were not able to eat during the day. So then doing that, of course, you might imagine the gilts per machine ratio get down quite a lot. And the location of that machine, as I put on the point number 3, it allows us to do a little bit better work on the gilts. Okay, so what was the outcome? Adding those or this 3rd machine I think that the most important action that helped us to solve that situation, it was the ratio of animals per machine. I think that it was higher than expected, higher than recommended for sure, because it was not recommended to have 40 plus gilts on that system. And then having a little bit of actions on the body condition and the animals, on how we enter the animals and the day that we enter the animals, we solved the problem. And nowadays, this farm will be a little bit above 90% on farrowing rate. So I think it's in good moment, or we find that farm in a good moment. And this action made the key for success on that particular farm. It's not the only way, but it worked on that one. So let's go to the second experience. On that one, the situation, it's similar. It's a farm that it's PERS positive, myco positive for sure, and it's been stable the last few years. So I wouldn't say that PERS is not the main problem there, even if it's a positive farm. But on that one, maybe it will take out your attention a little bit more, because we have pens of 50 animals, around 50 animals, and we have multiparous and gilts in the same pen. So now we go to the core question on that presentation today. The ratio of animals was around 15, 17 animals per machine, and the square pen design was 3 machines, but in that case was attached to the corridor. You will see a picture on the next slide, and it's attached to the corridor. The pen has separators, and it provides a hiding place for the ones that are less dominant. Let's put it that word, that it's a little bit nicer. So, of course, what's the question here? They call us, hey, we are having gestation losses in gilts, so we need to find out what's going on. If we don't mix the gilts with the sows properly, what do we have to do? Maybe the ratio of the machines, again, maybe was the solution in that case. So what were the actions that we took? We increased the feed provided by the machine about 300 grams during the first week, 7 days. We introduced the gilts 3 days before the sows, and then we tried to review carefully and pay a lot of attention during the first week after mixing. So now you will say, like, hey, you take very dramatic actions and very different. Which one was the one that made more success? On that particular case, I can tell you that they don't do any more to increase the feed intake 300 grams more per day. They keep doing the between 3-5 days before entering the gilts on the pen. And I think that this one was the key of success on that one. We didn't modify the ratio of gilts and sows per pen. That still is the same. We still pay a lot of attention after mixing, but I think that the key on that particular experience was that we entered the gilts, and we keep doing that nowadays. I was there, I think that a month ago, and I asked that because I knew that I was giving that presentation today, and they told me that, Isaac, we still do the same. We enter the gilts a little bit before. We make sure that they feel comfortable. They know the pen, they know the machine again, so they feel like they are home, and then we enter the older sows. On that experience, that it's a different farm, but I wanted to show you that because it's a similar layout, different machine, but a similar layout than the previous experience. The machine is attached to the wall, to the corridor, so you are able to see the feeders in front of you, and then you see the pen afterwards. In that particular experience, it's a multiplier, so PERS negative, myco negative, among other diseases, as you might imagine, and we work with the static pens in gilts. So we have between 28, 32 gilts per pen. And the way that the pen is designed, and now I'm showing a picture of multiparous pen, but it's exactly the same. It's 2 machines per pen. And that pen is also on the central area close to the corridor or touching the corridor. It's exactly the same layout that you see in the picture, but 2 machines per pen. Of course, in all the ESF designs, normally we put hiding places for the animals to be able to lay down. They like to lay down close to the wall. They like to be hiding from the dominant animals. So this is something that we normally have in all the designs. And also in this particular farm, even if we know that it's not needed, or the provider says that it's not needed, we have a training machine in the GDU. So all the gilts are able to see the machine, the doors, and the system on the GDU. What was the problem here? And here it looks a little bit more strange. I hope that it looks strange to all of you, but we start to see a lot of deaths, a lot of removals. And when we were doing the necropsies, the Monday that we visit that multiplier, we start to see a lot of ulcer, or a big percentage of that removals or dead animals, they had an ulcer. So we start to become a little bit worried about that. And and we start to see, hey, what's going on? So now you see one sentence that it's maybe answering a little bit the solution, but I can tell you that I perfectly remember that day when I was at the farm, and we were like several people, the provider, all the technical team that takes care of that multiplier, the health team, and we were like watching around and trying to see, taking the measures of the pen, checking the drinkers, the flows. I mean, we were checking everything that can be checked. And I will remember always, I was checking the screen of the computer, that you have a visual screen, and I saw a number there. And then I look at the gilt, and I realized that the gilt that it was waiting to enter to the door didn't have the same ear tag. And as you know, I mean, that happens always, and then opens the door and enters the gilt. But it's like, it looks like the gilt takes a lot of time waiting behind the machine. So going to the next slide, one of the things that we tried before the last one, and maybe I give another spoiler to the last one, it was we increased the training period. So we said, hey, make sure that the animals stay for more days, for a couple of weeks on the pen where you have the dummy machines, even if it was not needed, but we asked for that. After a few weeks, the problem didn't disappear, and we thought, hey, let's check the new gilts that are coming in. The problem still is there. We said, hey, we need to remove animals. Let's not work with 28, 30. Let's work with 25, 24. The problem didn't disappear. Then we did a very tough review. That was the provider done that, checking the amount of feed, the amount of water that this system was providing us, and everything seemed performing well. So the machine was working properly. So the funny part, it becomes here, when they review the parameters and the communication of the machine with the central computer, what they realized, it was a problem on the speed of communication. Okay, you need to know that these farms, as you might see on the bottom picture, they are huge farms. So some machines are very far away, and I don't know how the information flows, but I can tell you that the central computer was not receiving the order properly at the proper time. So when they solved that, they put a strongly powerful computer in the central office. The problem disappeared completely. We had calmer sows in gestation, and we didn't have the losses up to 7, 8, whatever percentage it was before. We become to normal levels that we consider normal, below than 3%. And nowadays, I would say that between conception rate and farrowing rate is a farm that it's working pretty well, below than 3%. Of course, you will expect all that for the health status as well. So that's another one. It's another farm from the same owner, so it's different farms. And this one is also perfect in terms of health, negative to myco, negative to PERS. And they work with the static pens on gilts. They have 2 machines that are on the central corridor as well. And we have these hiding places for the animals to be playing and hiding from the high dominant ones. We have a training machine on the GDU, as you might expect, the same than the other. And again, we started to see some increase on losses. We were at 2.5, so it was in normal rates, that farm. And we increased suddenly to 4.5 as an average. You will see on my last slide on this case, the numbers. But here, what we realized, that the animals were not calmed down. They were a little bit agitated. So we put a feeder, but it was with pellet straw. So we tried to have the toys that we have in pen gestations, but instead of putting a toy or a piece of wood, we put a feeder with pelleted straw inside. Also, we tell the machine to increase the ratio by 300 grams. We know that worked in previous experiences. Maybe it was not the key factor, but it worked to have the first week a little bit lower hierarchy problems or dominance problems. And then we check the water flow, the feed rate of the machine properly, just in case if it was not feeding properly. And then we eliminate the sows at winning that we saw that might be conflicting. So the sows that we see that maybe were not the best ones to be on the pen, we eliminate that sows at winning and we replace them by new gilts on the farm. So what was the thing that we see? And here you might see on the right side of the screen that I'm telling you the week of the year. And then on a little bit more on the right, I'm saying to you the percentage of losses from ultrasound to farrowing. And as you can see, until we find, let's say, the key on that one, the average was above 4.5%. After we implemented this, we had calmer animals as well. We had less problems on the pens, less fights on the pens. And nowadays, you might see the levels are still as those ones that you see on the bottom after measures were implemented. So I think that it was a success story as well, and we are really happy that we were able to reduce those problems on those pens. Okay, we are getting to the last one, the experience number 5. Here it's a very particular experience because it's also a farm. It's not a multiplier, that one. It's a CHM, what we call a closed herd multiplier. So it's a farm around 3,000 sows, I would say 2,700. And on that one, we have segregated on the confirmed gestation. So when we move the animals to the ESF system, we segregate gilts. And on the multiporous one, so we have all the gilts separated, but on the multiporous sows, we have one pen that is static, and you will understand that very quickly, and one pen that is dynamic. And you would say, why that? Those ESF machines that you see in the picture, the provider says that they can fit up to 70 sows per machine. So on a 2,700 sow unit, 2,800, we do more or less 140, 145 matings a week. So we might have gilts that enter to the dynamic one because we don't have enough gilts per week to full one machine. So we work with gilts in dynamic. And then we use the multiporous, one static and one dynamic, because one is going to be a full pen for that week, and the following pen, it's going to be half of the pen from one batch and the following half from the following batch. What we saw, its fertility was not good. So farrowing rate, was not good. We were losing more than 4%. And even if fertility on that farm is very good, it's above 92, 93%, the farrowing rate was below 88, something like that. So we were having huge losses here. So what do? We check every day the animals that don't eat. We inject the animals with analgesic, with non-steroidal analgesic drugs, the ones that didn't have any symptoms with analgesics. Then we were inspecting the pen 2 or 3 times a week. So that will come back to Matthew's question, that sometimes you need to increase the times per week that you visit all the pens. Then we did treatment or isolation to the ones that were sick. So for example, a sow that had fever or a sow that has a lame problem. On those ones, we treat them and we isolate it. Isolated means we move them into a crate that it's going to be becoming like an infirmary. And then we try to work reducing a little bit the ratio to 66 multiple sows per pen. When possible, remember that if farrowing is not good, you try to breed a little bit more sows that week. But sometimes, remember, less is more. So what do we do to solve the problem on that farm? And you will see now in the next slides. We try to segregate the adult sows, because remember, the first one was never given a problem. The gilts were in dynamic, but were never a problem on that farm. The adult sows, we try to segregate the second and third parity in the static machine, besides putting them all them mixed there. So it's like working on body condition or parity. So you try to put similar sizes of sows in the same pen, and then the rest of the batch, we put them into the dynamic group, that it was the second pen with multiple animals. So here is one real example of what we were seeing. Remember from the slide that I showed you before on the training gill, that's going to be similar on that farm. On the upper side of the graph, what you see is the ranking of the animal. So remember that gill was entering, if I'm not wrong, on the place 47. We set as an average. This gill here, as you might see on the green line, it's entering on the ranking 13. So she's on the top entrance level. So she's entering perfectly every day. Suddenly one day she doesn't enter. Following day she enters forcefully. So we need to force those animals. And then we need to keep helping this animal to get to the point where she was. So it was observed in many of the sows that lost pregnancy this particular parent. So no apparent reason. We didn't see anything happening. Was a good sow always, all the gestation, as you can see here, many days entering properly, and suddenly this animal didn't enter. And was not any problem up to that day in terms of feed consumption or ranking. On the lower part, you see the feed. So she was eating properly the quantity of feed that was supposed until the day that she is not going in. So what was the point here? The red part on the top, it's what we were seeing after analyzing that visual example that I showed you today. We were seeing that many of the sows or many of the animals that were losing pregnancy were following that particular pattern. And as you can see here, I'm not really proud to say that, but the percentage of losses was huge, huge, huge. And we had several difficulties to find out how to solve that problem. Then, as I told you in the previous slide, when we think or when we tried to solve the problem on that particular experience, the ultrasound checked after farrowing implementation was down to green or amber levels in most of the weeks, besides 1 week that you see 4.1, but I don't give any other important that it's a coincidence. But all the weeks after that, what we are seeing is no problems, and all the animals are eating properly, and we think that we found the solution as well for that experience. So I would say that now getting to this point, and I would say that showing again the spoiler slide that I told you at the beginning, so maybe some people left the presentation at the beginning after that first slide because that was the take-home message slide, I would say. So what I have to say here, after a few slides discussing about the introduction of gilts, about mixing animals and how to handle pen gestation integrity, and for me integrity means that this integrity keeps up to the end of the gestation. So let's remember that point that I showed you at the beginning, starting from top on the left side. So where you see the word staff training. So people, remember, as all of us know, people is 100% of success. So 100% of us will share with me that the most important player in this game is the staff. I don't have any doubt that we can be speaking about that hours. We can have the best technical service. We can have the best after sales service, the best provider. If we don't have good staff, the scenario will not be success scenario. So if people is the key to deliver, and without them, it's not possible to see the potential of the animals. In some situations, the following one, the second one, where you see the ratio of sows per machine, I was taught that less sometimes is more. And I said that sentence already before. A proof of it for the first experience I share with you today, but it's not always the solution. So remember, ratio of sows per machine, sometimes we feel like, as a technical staff, that's the first thing we need to do. Let's remove some animals because this machine cannot feed properly. Sometimes it's not the key, but let's remember, it's good to take and pay attention to that. As important of having people with good skills is training the animals. I told you several times during my presentation that training of the gilts, it's key, mandatory, crucial in the tunnel kind. It's a little bit less difficult, no needs for training on the what we call free access ESF kind. So it's important, but make sure that dominance is established. And when we say that, training gilts, helping the gilts to enter, playing the dominance, the average daily gain, all these things needs to pay attention, because remember, if they are not eating properly, we will have impact on performance. So let's not forget that training gilts is important. And maybe, as I told you, on that kind of free access ones, maybe only 2-3% of the animals, 4% of the animals, we need to help them the first days. But that happens because they don't have training before during the GDU. So going to the top on the right side, paying attention to the pens after mixing is key. We saw that on the different examples. We saw that in some slides, and it's a key to prevent future problems. So making sure that dominance, it's perfectly established, like on the gilts and training, after mixing a pen gestation, after breeding, it might be on after breeding itself, or after you unleash or put the animals on loose gestation, but make sure that dominance is established and we pay attention to that, because it's very important that the animals don't suffer, and the first week is the only week or the most important week where they will suffer. Pen design I put here. Here, I would say, like, let's stop inventing the wheel, okay? Providers have lots of experience, as we all do in our work. So let's believe on them. They have good experiences, bad experiences. They learn from the mistakes. So hey, let's listen to them, and let's make sure that we listen to the design that they recommend. So the blueprint that they tell for their machine is the one that we should use. That's I don't have any doubt on that one. And now the last key message or take-home message would be the knowledge of the system. What I mean by that, I would say that maintenance, it would be my last advice, it's important that we think that we have at least 2 people on the farm that will take care of the proper knowledge of the system, not only on the software, also on the key elements of the machine, the doors, the electronics on the machine, and how to interpret the results that the machine is telling you and the alarms that the machine is telling you. Because if the system is providing us with some alarms, let's try to understand them, because if we don't understand them, we will not do nothing, and then we'll complain to the provider. So, being said that, Matt, I hope that with this summary, the audience that is watching today the webinar have a different point of view. And I hope as well that we have been able to accomplish the expectations. And also, I hope again that we answered some of the questions that they had before joining the meeting today. With that, let me not forget to acknowledge the whole European PIC technical services team, especially Patri, that was the one that helped me in putting those experiences that I showed you at the end together. And I only have one thing to say. Many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for your presentation. This has been an incredibly comprehensive account of ESF in various sow farms. I think usually when people go to a session or listen to a presentation, they're expecting to hear 1 or 2 scenarios, but we got 5. And so we really thank you for that. I think one huge takeaway that you really hit on multiple times was that, you can have a piece of technology that does an incredible job, but there's still a need to respond to that animal in need and a need to follow up to that animal appropriately. And so labor holds yet a major piece of the puzzle that answers these problems, but this technology can give us that extra slight edge that we all need to become successful. When you look at these ESF systems and you look at the changes in the, I would say, regulatory landscape with Prop 12, how can ESF help guide producers through Prop 12 in more of a successful way?
So, I mean, I'm not that used to Prop 12. Of course, I know it because I've been several years in the US and I have friends there. But I would say, let's put my example, and correct me if I'm wrong. We have here several customers that do the breeding and free. So that would be like they are on breeding on stalls, on spaces, and then we free them into the pen gestation. On that particular scenario, you asked me which might be the advantages that we have on ESF. And I think that I might forget some of them, but for sure, importance them, it's like you look at the animal individually. So every ESF station is going to tell you how this animal is playing inside that pen. So ranking, as I told you, and it looks like a very, I don't know, I would say that it's not even important. Some people doesn't even think that ranking can be important, but ESF is telling you the ranking of that animal. So following the pattern, she's entering at the beginning, the middle, at the end. So this is some information that we will use. Also, I would say another one, it's the feeding. Remember that as a technical services from a genetic company, we have a specific strategies to feed the animals after breeding, before breeding, when they are gilts. So when you feed an animal after weaning, we normally have some animals that come out from the farrowing room with very good condition, body condition, and some animals that lost condition. But most of them, they will show proper heat, and we will breed them. So on those machines, you can slowly go up the feed intake, and then deciding if it's getting to the perfect body condition, slowly going down. Nowadays, what we do is, hey, we check the feeder, maximum feed intake ad libitum, and then when she recovers, we put that at 2 kilos, 1.8, 2.2, whatever is the ratio, depending on the energy levels. So I would say that's another strength of the machines. It's allowing you to go slowly on the decrease, so that will mean less stress for the animal. And maybe among others, but I think that everything related to individual care, it's going to be really a key of success with that Prop 12, or for me, the breeding and free systems that I have here.
Well, thank you for your time and this presentation. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions from the audience, and I'm looking forward to the panel.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the panel for the Gestal Swine Summit. We're excited to close off this great month of Gestal talks and wrap this up for you here today. I'm Matthew Rhoda. I'll be the host for this session, and I guess I'd love for all of the panelists here to introduce themselves, their backgrounds, and I guess what they're looking forward to today.
Great. Yeah, Matthew, I'll jump in there. My name is Jennifer Brown. I'm a research scientist in ethology, so swine behavior here in Saskatchewan, Canada at the Prairie Swine Center. So yeah, I do research on management of sows in group housing. I've done some studies in the US at the Carthage Vet Services, looking at uniform versus mixed parity groupings and the effects on sows and gilts. And currently I have a study looking, comparing static versus dynamic groups in our research barn, different mixing times. So our control group is mixed at 28 to 35 days after breeding. And then we have a static group mixed either 3 to 7 days after breeding, and then also a dynamic group mixed 3 to 7 days after breeding. So yeah, I'm looking at the social status of the sows within the group. So yeah, we're doing some feed competition tests with them, and yeah, looking at the interaction between all these factors, because yeah, there is so much variation in the ways we can implement group housing. And yeah, I think it's a very nice talk by Dr. Huerta about all the different troubleshooting methods that he uses when trying to solve some of these reproduction problems. So happy to join the panel today. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I am Telma Tucci. I'm a vet, a field vet. I'm from Brazil, but live since 30 years in Italy. And I am doing consultancy and training people. And also I am involved in welfare issues. So I'm also very happy to be here with so good experts.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. It's my pleasure to join you today. My name's Tanner McCulley. Hopefully you can hear me here. A bit about myself. I was born and raised here in Southeast Iowa. I grew up around our family's integrated swine business. I've worked in grain and milling, wean to finish production, and now, of course, sow production. Received my MBA from Western Illinois University, returned to the business as a third generation owner, and today I oversee approximately 25,000 sows in production. Tri-Oak Foods has operations in 5 US states, and we currently have around 70,000 sows. The majority of our sows are housed in open pen gestation, and we'll have approximately 30,000 sows gestated in this ESF type of production. Most of this was done through barn conversions as opposed to new builds, so take that into account as we talk here today. And then, yeah, finally, we began our relationship with Gestal just over 3 years ago.
So in our brief time here together, I would like to try to cover all of the different areas of expertise that we have on this panel, because there are plenty of different areas of expertise in the way that we've approached this as a group. So to start, I would like us to just talk about, from your perspectives, what are the major challenges that you see us facing as an industry as we will look into the future around mixing parities? And I guess let's start with Telma.
Well, in reality, in Italy and in Europe in general, we have already a bit experience of mixing sows after 30 days, because usually here, not all farms have crate to crate as in the past, very past. So we are used already to mix, and we know we face many problems already now, even before the introduction of the Rio law. It was very usual to mix sows, and the problems are the same, but even worse, because sow is changing. Sow is requiring more attention. They are more delicate. So what we have learned, it's not enough, and we need to go ahead. Usually we tend to separate gilts and also parity ones. When we wean sows, usually we separate parity one sows and also and a bigger group of old sows.
Gotcha. How about you, Tanner?
Hey, Matthew, could I have you repeat that? You kind of had a little cut out there.
Yeah, so it'd be great to understand some of the challenges that you face when you are considering mixing parodies as our industry is evolving over the near future.
Sure. So Dr. Huerta hit on it a lot of times and really focused on the importance of gilt training. We've really focused on that in the last few years, making sure that we introduce the gilt to this environment, try to mirror the pin as best we can, with crates exposure, with water placement. That seems to have been very beneficial to us. Today, I can't tell you that we don't have any challenges, but we seem to get along really well with parity mixing. We don't necessarily do it purposefully or in all flows, but when needed, we don't shy away from it. The gilt training has been huge for us. It's a great way to start crate acclimation, and then honestly, we feel like it's alleviated some of the immediate impact of that gilt going into a hard crate at breeding. So that's been a nice bonus. We try to target this for a couple weeks. Once they're in the pen, a big challenge for us is, like you'll probably hear me repeat a couple times, is labor, making sure that we establish a couple, 2 or 3 experts on the farm that get out there daily, walk pens daily, get sows and gilts up, and just look for those animals that need immediate follow-up and interaction before waiting, for that day 2, day 3, no visit report, if you will.
And what about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, mixing parodies. I been to a lot of herds, and certainly here in Western Canada, we've got some much larger herds than certainly we normally see in the East. So yeah, with ESF systems, it's much easier in a larger situation to separate out. Definitely the gilts benefit from being in a uniform parity grouping, and then yeah, with your higher parodies, I still think it's nice if you have the opportunity to separate out even higher parity sows. We have a lot of Hutterite colony farms here. They're usually maybe 600 sow farms, but even there they notice if you've got both purebreds and hybrid sows, they find that the purebreds often get the worst of the aggression, so they would rather separate even out their purebreds from their hybrids. Yeah, the study I did in Carthage, that's a 6,000 sow herd, I think, and we really found that the gilts in that farm benefited from being in a uniform group. The other parodies, we didn't really see any significant differences, but certainly with the gilts, we saw better back fat accumulation during gestation than when they were in the mixed group. And then here in our Prairie Swine Center barn, yeah, we used to, we've got a free access stall system. So every sow gets fed every day in a stall. It's, we would love to have some ESF or free access ESF systems here, but from a research perspective and testing out a bunch of different diets, we find the free access is very, very flexible. But yeah, in the past, we included our gilts in mixed parity stable groups. But in the last couple of years, working with PIC and our herd, we've separated a pen and we keep our gilts in a uniform group now. And we find that, yeah, that's better for our gilt development in that first parity for sure.
Yeah. I mean, so going off of that, with everybody talking about some of the challenges you highlighted and some of the things you were doing or looking at, from the panelists here, what is something that is being done, that you have done, or that you would like to do around research with mixing parodies or open pen gestation that you think our industry needs?
I personally think there's a whole long shopping list of things, and as Dr. Huerta mentioned, Isaac mentioned numerous times, the management. That's one thing that you really can't really quantify very easily. but obviously has a big impact. So what the challenge in the research becomes, you know, how do you implement multiple different treatments within one barn? You know, in my barn, I can do that. We've got a small barn and a manager, barn manager, who understands our purpose is research, but it's that confounding factor of the barn is really makes it very difficult to understand really what's causing the impact. So I like hearing examples like Dr. Huerta had of actually going on farm and doing that deliberate troubleshooting process to try and identify what factors are influencing that specific case, because yeah, the research in this area is very challenging.
Tanner, what thoughts do you might you have?
Yeah, sure.
Me?
So,
Tanner.
sorry. You know, you'd think here stateside, you know, the hot topic, of course, is going to be what's facing us out of California with Prop 12. So, you know, it's hard to do research on commercial barns, but, you know, we would take a stance that you need to be out front and at least understand what challenges might be in front of you. So, you know, you start looking at challenging some paradigms around different forms of production, such as breeding installs straight into pens. How do you maximize your footprints on some of these barns and do these conversions into OPG or open pen gestation, or whether that's free access stalls or DSF type production. Some of those things are going to require you to, you know, challenge your paradigms around parity segregation, things that you might have learned under stanchion production, for example. So, you know, just really looking at, you know, what are our understandings? What can we do as we're asked to adapt a little bit here? Breeding in crates and going straight into pens, you know, probably doesn't leave us with a real good feeling for most of us, and getting out there and just getting a better understanding of what might make us successful in there. So we're trying a little bit of that. And like I said, it's hard to do research on a commercial barn, but trying to do it in a few different environments to get an understanding of what might be the common feedback from our managers.
Telma, what about you?
Well, I think looking at challenges, I think some things we can improve already right now. When mixing the groups, we are not used to use enrichment. We are used to do in the small animals, but in sows, we a little bit forget about it, but it could be implemented in many ways and in routing, as a routing process. So this, I think it's not difficult and can be done. But one thing I think will be difficult when maybe we have no crates at all in the farm, and ESF will help a lot already from weaning. But when you have to inseminate the sows, maybe we need to get a different approach. And I still don't know how would be the best, or the bore stimulation area, or just, I know a farm that it's doing that. They just win in groups, and they go with the bore, sign all the sows that are ready to inseminate, they are in heat, and slowly, as we should go in these situations, and he comes afterwards with a post cervical insemination, even if the sow is not standing and that this is the right moment to do, and they are doing it with the free sows. The problem is with gilts, because post cervical insemination in gilts is not so widespread and easy, and this could be a real challenge.
So I'll start with Tanner with this one, and then I'll let Telma and Jennifer kind of approach this from their perspectives as well. Is when you are working with your teams and your employees around the use and management of ESF or open pen approaches, what are some of the key things that you want them to focus on, and how are they held accountable?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Matthew. It's something that over the last couple of years we've really seen as an advantage of maybe take a step back and we can all talk about labor challenges today that face us, and that's a whole nother subject. But one thing we notice is, you know, we don't hire a lot of quote unquote farm kids anymore. So Dr. Huerta talked about the electronics and the challenge and things like that. And what we've really seen is, you know, let this technology be an advantage to you, the people that we're putting in farms today and that are working for us. It can be certainly a tool that should lead to better animal husbandry. I mean, it helps us identify animals that are not eating for whatever reason. It's pen environments are, I would say, easier to chore for individuals. You get a better idea of the whole sow. You get to see the whole picture instead of a stall. So for us, what's really worked is, like I said earlier, just establishing 2 to 3 experts on the farm, quote unquote experts, somebody that's going to own that system. Usually we try to find somebody that's, you know, possibly a breeding manager or kind of lead tech, what we would call them, but somebody that's excited to take on more. The accountability part is, you know, in our particular system kind of provided for us, as Dr. Huerta talked about, with the alarm list or the action list that's provided to you every day. But we really encourage people to get out and walk pens every day. Don't wait for those action lists, especially as a herd is unestablished and is building awareness to it. But really just let the technology be an advantage for you. Identification of individuals versus, you know, choring a whole barn. You're going out there and walking and trying to identify those animals. I think getting back to the basics of walking a pen and understanding the dynamic of what an animal is doing. Is it in the corner of the pen asking to be left alone? You know, those type of things have really just been advantageous for us. But at the end of the day, we really, you know, see this technology as being an advantage for us on feed costs and all those other things, but really just probably better herdsmen too. So we're excited for it.
So you really hit on something there. Other than just relying on the technology itself, there's also this proactive expectation or proactive approach to walking pens that might differ from certain people's approaches to this. Do you think that also helps that person who is being proactive be better trained to identify sows that may be needing assistance? Because if they have to come back to that pen later in the day or tomorrow and they see that same animal there that they didn't address, do you think there's a learned expertise that comes from being proactive and walking these pens prior to the technology telling you there's an issue?
Absolutely. And Jennifer, with her, you know, background, probably can elaborate on this, but absolutely, you're going to see individuals get a better understanding of animal behavior, cues that they're giving you, things of that nature.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Tanner. Yeah, we see, you know, when barns have converted to group housing, I got a bit of feedback here. Barn staff generally, you know, they're apprehensive at first, but then once they start working with the sows in groups, I think they get a lot of, you know, positive feedback from actually working with animals instead of just, you know, going around a stall barn. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, the labor problem in the swine industry is, I think, kind of a global problem. But I'm hopeful that you know, barn staff will get a more positive feel and enjoy working with animals more in these systems. And we really need to focus on our training and animal handling skills and observation of animal behavior and encourage those kind of people to be working with the animals. And at the same time, yeah, we need people who are very familiar with the software and the hardware side of things. So again, yeah, a wide set of skills that we really need in the barn. So valuing our barn staff and making sure they get the training they need to run these systems well. But I'm optimistic that yeah, the whole barn situation can be a better environment for barn staff with some of these systems. And then you know, now because everyone's familiar with working with software, it's a benefit to a lot of barn staff now, to young people working in these barns compared to the past. Initially, I think it was a bit of a hurdle because people weren't that confident working with computers, but now I think that's it's a positive thing for barn staff.
Tell me, what thoughts might you have?
I think, yeah, technology is arriving and will stay and will help us a lot. The only thing I think is that we should train people, because if we just rely on technology, then they will probably see the sows from the corridor and they do not step in, and they should walk in, and only this way he will understand the behavior of the sows and get a better knowledge and to do a good job.
So we've hit on some of these things as we've talked about this right now, but given that there's limited time and anybody that's listening right now, we'd love for you to submit your questions so that we could have the panel talk around them. Before we go to questions or have a free-form discussion amongst us, I'd really like you guys to talk through either words of advice or words of warning as implementing a system like this. How can you help better prepare those who are listening, who are thinking about either converting to ESF or open pen gestation and or are involved in it today? And we'll start with Telma.
Okay, I will follow the advice of Isaac, Dr. Huerta. Follow the advices of the company. First thing, don't be yourself. I want this different, or does not work. So the first thing is this: train people in an office and in the barn. I think this is the right thing.
Before we head off to another panelist here, when you talk about training people in the office and in the barn, what are some of the things that you really try to hone on? What are some things that really get people excited when you're training? How do you train successfully?
Giving my own experiences. I think this is always very good. It's like storytelling. Everybody gets keep on it, and this is good fishing.
Sounds good. If we have time, I might come back and ask you for a story. Jennifer, how about you?
Advice or warnings? Yeah, barn staff need to be prepared. They're usually apprehensive. If you haven't worked with sows in groups, you know that they're big. They can be scary. I'm always so impressed at how calm and accepting, you know, large sows are of our handling. But so giving people the confidence that they can yeah, that they're going to get through the transition and yeah, get better animal skills. I like Telma's idea of telling stories. Yeah, you have to make it personal and engaging for people to really grasp that yes, this is a change, but it's a positive change. Yeah, because you will find a lot of skepticism. I know there's been some studies where group housing was not successful, and often that was because, yeah, the barn staff weren't really well prepared for that transition and didn't have a positive attitude around it. So I think that's about the main point. Thanks.
So with technology and with ESF group housing, is that more of a broad statement as well? If you don't have your people on the same page, aware of the goals and bought in, that anything you try to do is going to be a struggle? Is that a fair statement?
I'd have to say so, you know.
Yeah.
Technology, yeah, even if I'm faced with, I got to change my laptop or something minor like that, it's an incredible hurdle, and we need that. We need a little bit of hand holding to get through that mental barrier. You know, once we're on the other side, sure, things start to click, and yeah, we realize that, yeah, any apprehensions were maybe larger than in reality. But yeah, that teamwork approach, and yeah, having a clear plan of how the transition is going to occur, and, you know, what staff responsibilities are, and then, yeah, for training, finding those individuals who already have that sensitivity and awareness around animal handling. Yeah, and giving the tasks to the right people. It's hugely important.
There was a panel or a presentation at the Oklahoma Port Congress this year where they talked about change and implementation of various things. And they said, they showed a picture of everybody happy and everybody looking real smiley around what is the thought of change, right? Let's talk about change. And then they said, well, what is the implementation of change? It was like a mob. It's like people like talking about change, but actually having change is often a challenge. But I guess, Tanner, what are some of the thoughts that you might have around words of warning or advice for people who are looking into this?
Sure. So echo what Telma and Jennifer said about training people. Also having an understanding that whether this is a new population event with all gilts or whether this is converting an existing herd, you're going to have a somewhat long road ahead of you on establishing that herd, 28, 30 weeks to get to where these animals really understand what's going on. Just keep encouraging your people to be patient as we're out in those pens. Jennifer touched on it. Pen dynamic and working with animals is a lot different than back alleys and crates. But as we've established herds and probably even more so established the staff, we wouldn't have a single person that would go back. Jennifer touched on it. It is a better environment for our people, and they appreciate that. It's just unbelievably brighter and quieter. So those are all great things you're going to realize as you go down there. I'd echo the same sentiments of listen to your providers, your builders. They've done this 100 times. I think Dr. Huerta said, don't reinvent the wheel. There's some really good thoughts around pin dynamics or pin layout, and I think a lot of those seem to be consistent. Other than that, the couple things I would say for somebody going through that is very proactive. As you're building pins with new animals that have not seen this system before, be very active day one on getting these girls up and getting them quote unquote trained into the station. If you wait 2-3 days and look at that action list, you're going to be having an uphill climb. And then I've said a few times now, gilt training for us has been paramount. Just getting exposure to that gilt to this system seems to, we just have probably less than 5 to 10% of our gilts need to be trained or pushed into a station day one. So it's just been really important to us to get those gilts with at least 2 weeks, exposure into these crates, or this system, I should say.
So we don't have a question popping in right now. So I'd like to just dump right into the gilt training that you brought up. What are some of the strategies that you deploy within your operations that does allow you to have such a low amount of gilts that you have to go and train? What does that process look like for you?
So for us, it's we try to target, we'd like to do it a little earlier. We'd like to do it prior to heat check on gilts, give them at least 2 weeks, maybe upwards of 30 days in these pins. And we really just try to mirror the environment they're going to see post preg check. Cup water is located in the same place, it's the same ESF station, just with an ad lib feed. We don't limit feed elsewhere in the pen. Those are thoughts for considerations I've heard from others, but we've never done that. We really just give them ample time to explore, observe, and it's been night and day, probably gone from 70-75% of gilts self-training to, like I said, upwards of 90+%. So getting in those pins, getting them comfortable with people, interaction, all those things are bonuses. And then probably the hidden bonus for us is it seems to have really alleviated the stress around that first hard crate introduction, where we moved that gilt post heat check into a breeding area. In the past, they would have seen off feed events and gilts clearly showing signs of stress. It seems to have alleviated that quite a bit, just getting exposure to a crate and associating it with feed, water, those type of things.
So I guess from there, it'd be a great time for us to kind of conclude this session. I think everyone who has attended this can pull a lot from all of the expertise and advice that you guys have shared. I want to thank you on behalf of Gestal and all of its sponsors for you guys being a part of this and for you sharing your words of wisdom with the audience.